I'm going to just watch a little bit of this here. It's kind of, just the right word would be heartbreaking, pertaining to how our government officials have really went backwards whenever it comes to being honest with the American voter. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was this bad. Please listen. And this is the reason why that I say that neither candidate is worthy of the American vote. Because one is just as bad as the other, regardless whether to be the Republican or the Democrat. And it's really stalemate. It's a political stalemate.
And now here's another quote from the White House spokesman, quote, "As we have said many times before, the president was not in business with his son. As we have also said many times before, the Justice Department makes decisions in its criminal investigations independently. And in this case, the White House has not been involved." Brian Kelby, these are ludicrous statements.
So that statement is coming off something that was revealed by the whistleblower last night that said that he was shaking down this Chinese executive with direct links to the Chinese government. Evidently, he was upset that he wasn't directly responded to or got the money that he was looking for. And my dad's going to come after you. He's not going to be happy sitting right here next to me. Now, that, on top of the fact that Tony Bobulinski said they met at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the top of that they've talked before, the top of the fact that the whistleblower brought up what, unrelated to what other people said, when you look at the ledger, 10% for the big guy is Joe Biden. I mean, I don't even know how many people on MSNBC and CNN really take those statements seriously. Did he have a crack problem? Absolutely. But was he coherent enough to write a pretty coherent text messages? Absolutely. You might not like the text of it, but it was fine. There were commas and there were dashes. Crackheads don't usually do that. At least he wasn't a crack at the time. The other thing is, he was strong enough to be able to cut deals with Kazakhstan, Romania, Ukraine, and China. So he had moments of lucidity. And with addiction, as almost everybody I know has somebody directly affected of addiction. So no one's judging people on that. We're talking about not Hunter Biden's future or past. We're talking how it relates to the President of the United States when he was vice president and how it relates to our security. So no one gets sidetracked. They want you to talk about addiction and how bad it is. That's not the point. And that's what people want to grab onto. What I thought was interesting is I was watching another channel right before I hopped on here, and they were saying, they outlined this whole thing. But they say, whistleblowers, that's typical. If you're not happy with the way an investigation's going, and you work harder in a case, you're going to go find somebody to complain to. That's what whistleblowers know. Not work harder in a case. They said you were back. These whistleblowers, two of them, you made me back off after 5 years. Every time I got close to getting an answer, you made me back off.
You, the Justice Department.
Yeah,
the FBI.
Yeah, that's
just saying.
Right.
Just saying.
So it's the AG.
We've got more quotes. What do you got? Communications like these made it clear we needed to search the guest house at the Biden's Delaware residence where Hunter Biden stayed for a time. Listen to this. In a September 3rd, 2020 meeting. 2020, September 3rd. 3 years ago, the assistant U.S. attorney told us there was more than enough probable cause, but the question was whether the juice was worth the squeeze. She continued that optics were a driving factor in the decision. She said a lot of evidence in our investigation would be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, but then said there's no way we will get that approved. Brian, this is totally political. Totally. FBI and Justice Department.
So if you think about this,
it's a protection racket.
2020, right before the election, 2 months before. Do you think the voters need to know about that? I think so. Do you think that in 2019, when we found out, by the way, that's when the FBI realized the laptop was real in 2019. Now my question, and I texted him before I came out here, to William Barr. Now, the AG found out about we found about the text message after the election. But I want to know, did William Barr get informed by the FBI that there was a laptop that showed international business dealings with the former vice president and candidate for president of the United States, and that could have illicit deals?
It proves right there that it's a charade. It's a charade in the eyes of the general public that these people have went up there and acted the whole time like they was in our interest, And instead of being in our interest, they was in their own. And we have heard that now again and again and again for several years, pertaining to either the Republican or the Democrat Party. And because of it, it has turned into a charade. A laughing stock. Donald Trump's right whenever he says that the system is rigged, and Fox News is right whenever they talk about how that Biden, pertaining to the Democrats, are basically doing the same thing, if not worse.
Off of influence peddling with the future president of the United States, or at least one who's going to get the Democratic nomination.
What do you say?
I'm waiting for my text message back, because that's my turn. They knew that they went ahead and did their Apple password, and they said, okay, this is Hunter's laptop. And they still went ahead and got 51 Intel experts to sign off and said this was classic Russian disinformation, knowing it was not. I mean, this is unbelievable to me.
That's what the Bidens are telling us. The WhatsApp communications messages incorrect, or they're blaming it on addiction.
They're saying that it was accurate, but the president's son, the president said his dad wasn't there.
His father was there. Yeah, well, he was. I don't believe a word of it. They're telling us that the Treasury suspicious activity reports are incorrect. They're telling us that the whistleblowers themselves, who were all over this, are incorrect. They're telling us, the FBI is actually telling us, because the FBI has been so obstructive in this, the FBI is telling us that one of their own best informants, a guy in business who they paid a couple of $100,000 to down through the years, that he's wrong too, that there are no telephone tapes, that there is no Burisma oligarch, that all this stuff is just made up. See, here's the thing. Hillary Clinton's campaign made stuff up. And we've learned that in spades, and that was the John Durham report. This stuff, whether it leads or not to conviction, this stuff is not made up. These are factoids.
You can't just discredit everybody at the same time.
That's right.
And I'll add one more thing. They said everything is made up. All this stuff doesn't matter. But when you put it all together, it shows international business deals being done and money being made to the tune of $17 million. You're better at math than I'll ever be. Since when do you not pay taxes for 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018? And then when they do decide that you didn't pay enough taxes, they came to the conclusion it's $1.2 million, and he pays $100,000 restitution? What rate is that, Mike Good?
The American people have been skunked. The American people have been duped. And you could go back for the next 25 or 30 years in one administration or the other towards basically doing the same thing. And they have got up there and they thought that wasn't nobody paying attention to what's going on, especially whenever you have a debt $32 trillion, and all they done this year was like what they done last year and the year before that and the year before that. I think the debt has now been moved up something like 70 plus times since the 60s, and all they're doing is playing games with the American people and the American people's money and the American people's future. And it's turned into nothing more than a chaotic situation.
My goodness, these rich, horrible rich people that don't want to pay taxes like Joe Biden talks about, if he made, this is the big story, if he made $17 million in these various countries, including in the Congo with that energy company from China, where is the money? Why aren't you paying it? Where is the money right now? And number two is, how dare you get away with not paying any taxes on that? You should be paying close to 50% on that.
Of course, the supply side would say 25%.
Of course.
That's a joke.
Yeah,
Joke. Just kidding. Has this affect the 24 race?
I'm wondering.
I want pure Brian Kilmeade here.
Okay.
Instinct.
Number one.
Instinct.
My instinct is Trump should run on this. Don't worry about with the counting votes. He should run on, if you guys only knew what we know now, how would you have voted then?
Great point.
And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be better at 40. I'm going to be better at 47 than I ever was at 45. Maybe to president. And number two, number two is I'm wondering if Gavin Newsom and the governor of Illinois, and I'm wondering if the governor of Colorado is saying, listen, we know he's struggling. We know he can't do any rallies. We know he can't go 2 or 3 days without a major mistake like the what he just said with China, even calling them dictators unintentionally. So I'm wondering how much longer the Democratic field just stays RFK Jr.
All right. Akila's screaming at us. It is a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, they don't yell at me. They're nice.
Just me. No,
yeah,
no,
that's incredible.
Nice.
I like not being the host.
I can't blame anybody. Anyway, remember, you got Brian on One Nation with Brian Kilmeade. That's
8 o'clock,
Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox News. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Coming up here on Kudlow, listen, we started with $400 million for Solyndra. Now we're up to $9.2 billion for Ford. What's next for the high finance climate agenda? What a racket this is. We're going to ask the great Rick Perry, former Energy Secretary, plus presidential hopeful and my...
It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. Let's move on, move on. Let's go on. We know what that's going to be about. Let's move on. I've done seen part of this. That's the reason why I'm moving on. Now, right here. Hunter Biden. This is what they was discussing a while ago. Now we're going to do a follow-up.
Preferential treatment. Jackie Heinrich live at the White House for us with more. Hi, Jackie. Hey, Jackie, good evening to you. Despite that text message revealed by a whistleblower to Congress, the White House says the president's 2019 statement that he's never spoken to his son about his overseas business deals still holds true. That text appears to show Hunter Biden in 2017 shaking down a Chinese business associate for a payment invoking his father. Reading in part, I'm sitting here with my father and we would like to understand why the commitment has not been fulfilled. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows, you will regret not following my direction. I'm sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Hunter Biden's attorney is blaming his client's drug use, telling Fox, quote, any verifiable words or actions of my client in the midst of a horrible addiction are solely his own and have no connection to anyone in his family. White House officials are refusing to confirm the president's whereabouts on that date, but the White House counsel's office did respond also to allegations that Hunter's case was given preferential treatment by the DOJ and FBI. They tell us, as we've said many times before, the president was not in business with his son. As we have also said many times before, the Justice Department makes decisions in its criminal investigations independently, and in this case, the White House has not been involved. Attorney General Merrick Garland shot down those whistleblower claims that the U.S. attorney in charge of Hunter Biden's case was blocked from pursuing charges in California and D.C. by Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys. And also, he denies that a request for a special counsel status was turned down. AG Garland gave David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware in charge of this case, the sign-off, the green light, to go ahead and explain all this or talk about it when he deems fit. But today, Weiss's office declined to do that. Jackie? Jackie Heinrich, thank you so much. With me now, Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne from House Ways and Means that released that IRS whistleblower's testimony. Congresswoman, great to have you on the program tonight. Thank you for being here. Now, you saw this testimony, and you saw it firsthand. A lot of pieces were shocking, but which part stood out to you the most?
Well, I didn't get to see the testimony, but I have read this firsthand, discussed it on a great scale in our briefing and in our hearing yesterday. It is shocking how corrupt it has gotten and how it is their justice going after, folks that don't agree with politically while benefit protect the liberal elite, starting with the Biden. It's no surprise that they've gotten such that been going on for years. They're slow walking this investigation, actually allowed the statute of limitations on some of the most serious charges from 2014 and 2015 to expire, meaning that the justice system that should be protecting all of us is unable to go after criminal or civil penalties on Hunter Biden simply because the investigators were either prevented from doing their job from higher ups or told that they couldn't ask questions. The family was tipped off. This is what's going on in our justice system right now. So the first step that we made yesterday in releasing these testimonies at least put some sunlight on it, some transparency to force the agency to do their job.
Yeah, I think a lot of voters are outraged about this, and also some people on the right as well. House Oversight Chairman James Comer, Senator Tom Cotton, they both spoke about Hunter's charges, and they basically said that the U.S. justice system needs reform. Watch this.
Our investigation isn't just about following the money. It's also led Congress to realize that we have a system of justice in America that is biased towards Republicans. This family's already been proven to have accepted millions and millions of dollars mysteriously from foreign nationals all across the globe, and yet at the same moment in time that the president's son gets off with a slap on the wrist.
Obviously, there's been nothing from Merrick Garland because Merrick Garland is running the most politicized Department of Justice in modern times. But we got to demand answers as well from Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, and Janet Yellen as Secretary of the Treasury, who oversees the IRS.
What's interesting to me, Congresswoman, Republicans in the House say that about $17 million came into the Biden family. About $8 million of that, and the $17 million we're talking from Ukraine, Romania, and China, $8 million of that went to Hunter Biden. In Jackie Heinrich's report, she had a statement from his attorney who said that you really can't take anything, I'm paraphrasing here, that he said at that time because he was, dealing with addiction very seriously. But I'm wondering, then how is it that he managed to make $8 million or bring in $17 million for the family? And that's what a lot of people are outraged about here. They're wondering that $1 million that deals in this plea agreement as well. Where was all this money coming from? What was he doing for it?
That is a great question. A question that IRS whistleblowers wanted to ask, but their higher ups prevented them from doing that. They wanted to be able to get that information, but when they had potential raid to go get those documents, the Hunter Biden family was contacted and told to move. They were given advance notice of when those raids were going to happen. They were given calls. That doesn't happen to you or I or normal Americans. This was a protection job, and yes, there are some serious accusations. And Hunter Biden receiving $8.3 million, where we have no idea where it was received from, what he gave in reaction to that money. But we do know that there is a WhatsApp message that seems to go directly to a Chinese executive that says, "Hey, my dad's here. If you don't pony up,
right,
you're gonna face retaliation," which seems to be a clear-cut case of bribery.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant statement there in so many ways. And on top of it, the DOJ left this investigation what they call ongoing. Now, some people question whether it really is ongoing or it's only ongoing so that nobody else can move forward and demand information so that they can say, well, see, we're investigating, so we can't share. We've got to keep it private.
Unbelievable. But it's actually occurring right in front of our very eyes. The Republicans are saying without a doubt that it's a two-tier system. Of course, the Democrats are saying that it's a two-tier system pertaining to what the Republicans has gotten away with. I think it's a three-tier system, because if you don't have enough money to represent yourself and you get accused of a crime, you're at the mercy of the system in what the system does to you. And I am a clear example of that by coming back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014 and being harassed and dogged and haunted and provoked and pricked. And not only was it me, but my brother too, and we hired attorneys and went to court and tried to stop it and tried to get it stopped. And because they was so desperately trying to ruin my reputation and ruin my life, I didn't get nobody to stand in my corner pertaining to the defense in this county. It was prosecuting Johnson that looked at me and David together that said, you talking to me, I will not represent. But then he turned to David and said, you, I will represent. But that's just it. He didn't represent my brother David because my brother David was associated with Dennis Jackson. David Jackson was associated with Dennis Jackson, and David Jackson did not get, the courts dropped the ball on David Jackson. That's where I come up with the dereliction of duty. And to think that my brother and I was concerned about children across the road and the court turned it around. The reason why they turned it around was because that's what they wanted all along. They wanted to scar and mar and put a wrap upon Dennis James Jackson's life, that way that he'll never be able to obtain a weapon again the rest of his life, because now we're gonna make him plead guilty to a misdemeanor felony, a Class E felony. Well, that's what the state of Tennessee's been trying to do all along. If you go all the way back to the beginning phases of the Windmill Ministries ministry in 1989, they confiscated a sword in Madison County by the hand of Homeland Security, Secret Service, and said that I had a deadly weapon. A deadly weapon that you couldn't even cut butter with, that was locked up into a box that took the police officers almost 30 minutes to get it out. Now, if that's not an invasion upon my rights, once more I will kiss your tail and give you 30 minutes to draw up a crowd. So they've been picking and poking at me towards trying to bring me down all along, towards trying to criminalize me. And the whole time I ain't been doing nothing but putting out a message pertaining to the Bible. A Bible message that obviously certain people opposed. Okay. All right. Well, you didn't want to go out in a dignified way, so now we're going to go out in an undignified way as far as the planet heating up, all these massive volcanoes erupting, and all this suffering pertaining to the gun violence, and now all the drug violence, and all the other stuff that's turned into a Wild Wild West show over here in America. Once more, you didn't want to do things in the proper way. Well, you're going to do things. You're still going to check out. You're just not going to check out with dignity and respect like you would have had if you would have supported the Windmill Ministries going all the way back into 1988, whenever 9 tapes circulated into the White House. That's where the White House become bogus. And if the White House is bogus, every other agency underneath it is going to start becoming bogus too as well. That's whenever the problems started occurring with the attack on the Twin Towers in 91, Ruby Ridge in 91, excuse me, 1993. Also the event that happened down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, and then in 95, the Oklahoma deal. I think I'm right on those dates. If I had the paperwork in front of me, I'd be able to tell you. But this country continues to take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Just like them raising the debt ceiling again for the 70th something time. It is not a solution. All they're doing is delaying the problem. And the problem is going to be brought down to my grandchildren, because I got a granddaughter that was recently born about a month ago. So you may be asking, well, does he got any skin? Does he got any skin in this case? Yes, I do. I still got cousins. I still got aunts. I still got people that is associated with my family. Not so much on the Jackson side, but on the Jordan side. I still got people that cares about me. I got a son. So you can't say that I don't have something in this race.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously trying to keep it private. They're doing their best to keep it private, and that was actually the reason why yesterday's hearing was so important. Yesterday's vote was so important. Is that information has to come out. It had to be released. So not only Ways and Means can continue to do their job, but other committees in conference and in their job to investigate and get to the bottom of it. That had to happen. That was the first step. But these people who have been protecting the elites for so many decades, there will be a day of reckoning, and it's coming soon. And it's going to happen with Republicans in the House that are forcing them to do their job, adding.
The day of reckoning is already happening, my girl, pertaining to everything going south the way that it has, towards this government becoming illegitimate in the eyes of its own people, much less in the eyes of other people that used to look up to us, that used to respect us. Because of its inadequacies, it's becoming a mockery.
Transparency and stopping the corruption.
Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne, thank you so much for being here tonight. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. You have a great week.
You too. All right, turning to this. Billionaire Democratic donor George Soros pouring even more money into progressive candidates. Grady Trimble live in Washington, D.C. with that story for us. Hi, Grady.
Hey, Jackie. Soros' candidates in Virginia's prosecutor primaries went 3 for 3 this week. Now, to be clear, their challengers were also progressives who want to overhaul the criminal justice system, but this just speaks to the power and influence of George Soros in picking prosecutors. Among the winners in Virginia, the prosecutors in Fairfax and Arlington counties. Just since April, Soros-funded PACs dropped hundreds of thousands of dollars on both these candidates, on top of the more than $1 million in donations to get them elected in the first place 4 years ago. His PACs also poured money into the re-election bid of Loudoun County's controversial prosecutor. Republicans argue all of Soros' picks are soft on crime.
And when you have these criminal first, victim last prosecutors that they've been supporting, what happens is they walk into a courtroom and they see two victims. They see the victim, and then they think the defendant sitting at that table is also a victim. Well, if you're a prosecutor and you don't actually want to prosecute crime, don't be a prosecutor.
Exactly. And that was my brother's point towards not wanting to go back in front of Tommy Moore again, because Tommy Moore had already taken a case of my brother's that rightfully should have been heard, and before my brother even had a chance to get a word out, Tommy Moore throwed it out. And the case was about an attempted murder on my brother's own property down here. And to think that they wouldn't even allow for that to be heard is dereliction of duty. And of course, whenever I come back here, those animosities was still here. Those animosities had grown, and now all of a sudden I popped up onto the scene that intensified the animosities. And of course, whenever I started involving the law in wanting to defend me pertaining to the situation that was going on out here, that's whenever they run with it, because they knew that the law was not in our favor at 430 Beach Grove Road or 291 Thompson Road, but the law was in their favor, which made it that much more incredibly hard upon my brother. And to be quite honest with you, his emotions, because of not knowing what was going to happen from one day to another, they contributed to my brother's death at the age of 51. And the courts up there in Dresden, Tennessee are going to have to give an account one day in the final judgment pertaining to all this. And the whole time, it was a group of people that was trying to bury me that I can prove that began in 2005 in Martin, Tennessee, that come up with a crazy charge of falsifying files, which means to have the intentions of possibly being a homegrown terrorist. The core of origin where all this began was right here in Northwest Tennessee. And since then, they have humiliated me again and again and again. They have thrown me in front of the psychiatrist towards being studied like some sort of a laboratory rat, and that in and of itself has had a bearing upon my health, especially whenever they done what they done in Trigg County, Kentucky, that was coming from LBL. LBL had done already pursued a case on me on a federal level that by rights LBL should have pursued. If they was going to pursue, they should have pursued another federal case on me, because with the park being a federal park, but instead they crawfished and they turned it into a Kentucky County case. I had no earthly idea about Gary Hawkins and Lisa Hawkins pertaining to the two individuals that signed these warrants on my arrest and took two non-threatening telephone calls and put it in the category of stalking, to the point that they drove all the way down to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to pick me up because they was going to bash me one way or the other, and they was disappointed in the results that happened up in Paducah, and because they was disappointed in the results that happened in Paducah, now they was going to go after me in a different way. And to think that as many testimony tapes, or not tapes, but digital recordings that I have put out, and I still haven't got any type of confirmation on that. Oh yeah, there'll be restitution. Matter of fact, there's restitution right now happening pertaining to the bloodshed and the drugs and the $32 trillion, and seeing all these tornadoes rip and tear and basically doing what Mother Nature is doing pertaining to the forces of nature. Oh yeah, we're seeing justice. It's just coming in a different form. It's coming in a form that they wasn't expecting it. Because I done my part. I put the message out there. They didn't like the message. They wanted to stop the messenger because they didn't like the message. So now we're where we at. I just thank God that I'm still living to be able to make these documentations, these recordings, and maybe once the government, I guess, completely destroys itself and destroys its own people, maybe somebody one day will pick up some of this material and say, you know what, maybe this guy had a point. Maybe he had a valid point. Maybe he had a case in what that he was talking about the whole time. Because every one of these things that I put out, I know that I can back it. I've got the paperwork to prove it. And you know what? If I didn't have these things to prove, I feel like somebody would have done already knocked on my door of putting out false accusations. Incriminating false accusations. I feel like somebody would have done already knocked on my door, but that's just it. I can prove it. I can either prove it by paper, or I can prove it by the witnesses still living. I can prove it. And then to top it off, it wasn't good enough for me to go through a 6-month study up in MCC in downtown Chicago on the first federal case, but then they turned it into a state case and then I wind up going to LaGrange, Kentucky, that they wind up basically feeding me a bunch of poison that made me swell up and made me deteriorate my health to the point of gaining weight and becoming a diabetic. That's what the state of Kentucky's done. Right up here, give or take, about 75 to 100 miles from where I live. And it still has not been justified.
Soros has faced criticism for having an outsized influence on district attorney elections in big cities across the country. In fact, a 2022 report by the pro-police nonprofit Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund found he spent more than $40 million over the past decade to elect progressive prosecutors. I recently asked a spokesperson for Soros about this criticism, and here's what he told me. Soros doesn't have an outsized influence, he says. He makes legal, fully disclosed contributions to reform-minded prosecutors so they can get their message out, and voters across the country seem to like what they're hearing because they vote for these DAs. You might also remember just last week, Soros' son Alex announced that he was taking over George Soros' foundation, and he has said, Jackie, that he is even more political than his father. Jackie?
Grady Trimble, thank you so much. And now to this. 2024 Republican contenders addressing the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference today in Washington, D.C. in hopes of winning over the influential evangelical voting bloc. With me now, Forbes Media Chairman Steve Forbes. Always great to see you, sir. We appreciate your time. This is a field that's rapidly expanding.
I think we've heard and seen enough on this particular program pertaining to the corruption and the scams going on. People with the influences, regardless whether it's George Soros or a big farmer out here that may be worth a couple $1 million. I feel like that everybody and their brother pretty well gets it towards what's going on. And I personally feel like that if this much corruption, this much injustice has went on in my life in the past 30 plus years, God only knows how many other people out there that have went through similar circumstances that basically their lives has been ruined on account of various people that had big pockets that wanted to ruin their lives to begin with. Right there. You got it. Right there. Money. The almighty dollar bill.
Captivated the world over the last week because it's so relatable.
It sure did, and it left many people wondering and sort of glued to the TV for days trying to figure out what was happening and holding out some hope. But I think you make a really good point there with respect to the risk-taking aspect of it. Some would argue that we won't move forward in exploration of space or sea without bold risk takers who are willing to risk their lives. Dr. Justin Dorenzo, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. We've got former economic advisor to...
See all that money? What does the Bible say about money? The Bible says that it's the root. The love of money is the root to all evil. People wanting to become powerful. People wanting to become rich. They just don't want to become comfortable. They want to rule the roost with the good old $100 bills. The love of it is the root to all evil, is what the Bible says. And the Bible also says that pride cometh before a fall. So we're on our way down, regardless whether they like it or not. And just like all these people that wanted to contradict the teachings coming from the founder of the Windmill Ministries pertaining to the opening of the first seal in the book of Revelations, trying to stop the aggression of the second seal happening, of me being accused of trying to usher in the millennium, or me being accused of a celebrity hound, or me being accused of somebody that was off his rocker, or me being accused to the extent of 2005 whenever they changed their approach on me, and now they started trying to make me out to be a homegrown terrorist, which involved into what went on up in Kentucky in 2007, then it evolved of what went on in my life in 2009 out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So I can see what they have tried to do. There's a pattern here of what that they have tried to do, and my point is this, that if they have done what they have done in my life, in which I know that they have, and those that was involved in all this knows that they have, beginning with Kenton, Tennessee, then how many more people out there have they stomped on, romped on, and basically ruined because of the good old American dollar bill? And the thing about the graffiti money, about the dollar bill, whenever you owe more money than what you're worth, and you're still playing it off into the eyes of the people by not coming up with a solid solution other than kicking the can down the road again, hoping that somebody 2 years from now will be able to, I guess, pay the tab. I don't know. Whenever you're dealing with this type of instability, inadequacy, you're dealing with a government that is no longer the same United States government that I knowed about whenever I was born in 1961. It's no longer a legitimate government. And you don't think that other people can see this? You don't think that other countries can see this? Whenever you got the dog wagging the tail instead of the tail wagging the dog, you got a problem. And if nobody's willing to address the problem and come in clean, then the calamity that you're creating for not just yourself, but for your children and your grandchildren and possibly their children is going to be unlike anything imaginable. And these people that have taken a part in all this one day will give an account for this, because they have brought this horrifying calamity into now all of our lives. Good luck to each and every one of us. God bless America. God bless where we go from this moment on pertaining to our endeavors. God bless our military that we're truly going to have to rely upon in the next few years pertaining to how the world is evolving, how that various things is happening on big levels pertaining to starvation, pertaining to refugees, pertaining to all the fentanyl and the drugs. Good luck to each and every one of us as we try to pursue some sort of a normal life, because of these devils that have basically come in and sabotaged this government. And some people say, oh, travesty's been committed. A travesty's been committed. It's more than a travesty. It's more than a travesty. And I didn't mean to, I want to say this in clarifying this particular video, I didn't mean to overlook or scan through the problems with the baby submarine that recently just got through destroying 5 individuals' lives. But I've already documented so much about that, I felt like that it deemed necessary for me to go on. But don't think for a second that I ain't thought of various angles about that situation, to the point that maybe somebody sabotaged that thing. Maybe somebody the night before took a drill and drilled a hole in it before they ever put it in the ocean. I mean, I don't know what went on, and I don't know that they'll know what went on. I don't know that it will be investigated in the form of a possibility of a crime that been committed about that, because apparently that guy must have thought that what he had invented was going to work, even though he was using a different fiber or a different whatever. I'm pretty sure it's probably an accident, but there's always that realm of possibility, especially whenever you're talking about putting a billionaire in your container, that somebody could have caught wind of that, because I'm pretty sure by that man, by probably several of them's death, somebody's going to wind up financially on top of the mountain, financially speaking. Now, that ain't going to help none pertaining to the morals and how they love them people and how they care about those people, because that's going to be something that they're going to have to all get over. But the realm of possibility is there towards that unit being sabotaged. Just like I think since 1988, our government has been sabotaged by various other governments, various other nations that's come in here and manipulated our politicians in causing them to do this. It's been on overdrive, it's been on autopilot for quite some times now, pertaining to people really not paying attention towards what's been going on. And in the Clinton era is whenever it really started taking off towards going backwards. And of course 9/11 occurred. That's whenever God only knows how many trillions of dollars got spent on that in and of itself. And then the 10-year Afghanistan war, I think that was $2 or $3 trillion, not counting all the physical damage, not counting all the psychological damage. And I could go on and on and on about the mistakes that has been made since the late 80s in regards towards putting us where we are today. And of course, if you really start talking about this stuff like I'm talking about it right now, the vast majority of people want to push me off into the corner somewhere and say, well, he's already been elected towards being a nut. In the meantime, it was the nut that brought it to people's attention that the world's warming up from the inside, and not necessarily from the outside in, but the inside out. Now, if I was such of a nut, how come I was onto that? If I was such of a nut, how come I was on to the fact that the Oklahoma deal connected with the Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas deal was a big cover-up pertaining to evil, demonic people that once more was playing or preying on people's minds and preying on people's emotions? This thing is way out of kilter. And I just pray to God that God has mercy on us. Good luck. Shalom. Stained with blood.